Hello everyone, I'm Skratch. Welcome to the channel. This is another Raid Shadow Legends video. Hope you guys are having an amazing day. Plarium just released the video on the new dungeon boss coming to the game, which will allow us to ascend our accessories. Now, I'm gonna say, I think this patch might drop next week, just for the simple fact that Plarium really rushed this video out straight after the What's Next in Raid. Like, we usually don't get so much stuff in 1 week, basically, you know. So I do think the patch will come out next week. And good luck on your 2x ancients. If you are opening any shards this week, keep in mind 2x on the shards is coming every time. Like we always have them every second week. They don't disappear. Save your shards for the fusion, kind of like a friendly advice, so you're not in a pickle. But basically, I'm talking about this dungeon right here. So let's quickly have a look at the boss, see how OP it is, and if it's gonna be a new massive paywall for the players.
Hello everyone, welcome to our newest update preview video, dedicated to Accessory Ascension. We teased this feature in our most recent What's Next in Raid video, but now it's time for the big reveal. First things first, Accessory Ascension works exactly the same as Artifact Ascension. So we won't rehash all the core mechanics in full. You can find a link to our Artifact Ascension guide in the description below, or read the in-game guide if you need a full recap. The one important thing to mention is that instead of oil, you'll be using a new resource called Extract to ascend your accessories. Just like potions and oil, Extract comes in 3 types: lesser, greater, and...
What I'm curious is how many substats we have available for it. Like, is it gonna be the same, like 100 of them, so it's making it very annoying?
Superior. The higher
when you get
want to
something
ascend your
that you don't want on it,
the higher grade extract you'll need. Ascending an accessory will unlock a new bonus stat that improves with every new ascension level, and you won't be able to ascend accessories that are below rank 4 and level 12. That's about it. But this magical extract doesn't grow on trees, at least not any normal tree. Nope. You'll have to head to a new dungeon and win it via glorious battle. The Phantom Shogun's Grove is the place where it all happens. There, a mighty new boss awaits. Akumori, the Phantom Shogun. This ghostly daimyo is not playing around and has a couple tricks up his sleeves, including a new debuff and a special counter. But don't worry.
The boss looks so sick, man, right? Like, the boss looks amazing.
Got your back. Let's see how you can exercise the Phantom Shogun. Akumari's got quite the arsenal of impressive and complex skills that all tie into his unique mechanics. In order to understand them,
He removes your buffs.
We're going to start with his 3rd skill, Forest of Spears, to cover the important basics. Before unleashing any damage, Akumari first places a block passive skills debuff on your entire party for 3 turns. What's worse, this debuff cannot be resisted, and it's protected. Sorry, UDK, this isn't your fight. After that, Akumori smacks your champion with the highest crit damage, and then places an irresistible and unblockable enfeeble debuff on them. What's that? A new debuff? Why, yes. Akumori brings to bear a brand new debuff called Enfeeble. Champions under this new debuff can only place weak hits. Not only does this drastically decrease your damage and mean you cannot place debuffs in most situations, but it also plays into another major mechanic that we'll discuss in a moment. Next up, let's look at Akumari's passive skills. The first one, Shroud of the...
My god, can you guys imagine reading all this? It's just crazy, huh? This massive wall of text is one passive, guys. One freaking passive is just crazy.
Shogun connects directly to the new Enfeeble debuff we've just discussed. Akumari starts the battle with a special shade counter, and you're not going to want to let this thing tick up. The shade counter can be increased in the following ways. It increases by 8 stacks whenever one of your champions places a weak hit on Akumari, by 5 stacks for every critical hit Akumari himself deals out, and by 2 stacks for every Enfeeble debuff you cleanse from your team.
So when you cleanse the debuff, when he does crit hits, that stack is gonna increase. That is actually pretty crazy. Now, I do think we might find ways of how to counter the Enfeeble, to don't go on all the team and stuff, but the boss hitting you with crits is annoying. We can run decreased crit rate on him, and that might be helpful, right? If he doesn't cleanse himself constantly. And just for the weak hits that we're gonna have against the boss, if increasing the stacks by so much, I feel like that's gonna be super extreme. It's like next level.
Counter stack increases Akumori's critical rate by 1% and critical damage by 2%. So he's only getting stronger the longer he stays in the shade. Last but not least, this Shroud of the Shogun passive also grants Akumori immunity to turn meter reduction effects and enfeeble. If you think you're going to slow this samurai from exacting his revenge, think again. Okay, so that has to be it with the shade counter. No more horrible surprises? Well, we'd hate to disappoint you, as Akumori's Shroud of the Shogun passive also gives him access to some pretty powerful immunities, if you let him gather his strength. At 10 shade counter stacks, Akumori gets full immunity to poison damage. At 20 stacks, HP burn and smite damage no longer bother him. When the counter reaches 30 stacks, skills that deal damage based on Akumori's max HP become irrelevant. That's right, attacks like...
What? At 10 turns, poisons are not doing damage. 20 turns, HP burn and the smite are not doing damage. At 30 turns, enemy max HP champions are dealing no damage. Wow.
Cold Heart's Heartseeker, and any of Akritzia's skills will deal no damage if the shade counter gets above 30. Finally. Oh yeah, there's more. When the shade counter hits 40 and above, Akumori will ignore 100% of the target's defense when attacking.
This
And
is
if he
so
kills a
freaking
champion,
nasty.
he will immediately attack the rest of your party with an AoE attack. When the Phantom Shogun throws shade, he really means it. As you can see, you'll definitely want to keep the shade counter low at all costs. So let's dive into how you can do just that. Thanks to Akumori's Purge, the shadow passive skill, awakened champions can decrease the shade counter whenever they attack. The exact number of stacks removed by an awakened champion depends on their awakening level. So, champions with 1 awakening level will remove 1 stack per attack, while champions who are fully awakened will remove 6 shade counter stacks per skill. Given how powerful Akumori can become when his shade...
So awakening is really going to be super important for this dungeon. You gotta bring in champions that have high awakening stars. So I have a 6-star Cold Heart. She's gonna make it in my team. Like, is 100% no-brainer. I need to use her in here. And Accessory is only 1 star. I don't know how much stuff she's actually going to do in here. So I'm gonna have to look at champions that really have high awakenings in order to be able to be safe in this dungeon. It looks very, very hardcore at the moment.
Counter increases, I don't need to tell you how important it is to bring awakened champions to this fight, especially on the later stages. Whew, we've talked so much about Akumori's passives. Let's get back to his active skills. Unlike Forest of Spears, all of Akumori's other active skills will prioritize champions under an enfeebled debuff as their main target. Top tip, use the taunt buff to keep Akumori's attention away from your squishier champions under enfeeble. Scourge Sword, Akumori's second skill, is another brutal attack. Firstly, the Phantom Shogun targets 1 enemy. After he's smacked that champion, he'll then remove all buffs from your team, except from the initial target of the attack. As if that wasn't enough, Akumori will then spread the enfeebled debuff from the initial target to everyone else on your team. Remember, when Akumori uses his Forest of Spears skill, he places a protected enfeebled debuff, and he's looking to spread that debuff across your team with Scourge Sword. And because he's such a generous soul, Akumori will make sure that any champion who received an enfeebled debuff also gets a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. I know what you're thinking.
Lovely.
What if there's no enfeebled debuff to spread? Well, Akumori will end his Scourge Sword attack by placing an unblockable and protected enfeebled debuff for 3 turns on the champion with the highest crit damage. He really wants you landing nothing but weak hits. Effectively...
Okay, so he's going for the highest crit damage. I've noticed that he was prioritizing that on Razelvark, for example. I thought that maybe he's gonna go for the champion with the lowest HP or anything like that, but seems like he's going for the highest crit damage. So we're actually gonna have to bait this boss with different champions, right? Like, we cannot allow him to put this protected on your main DPS champion because you're not going to do damage. So you need to have a bait champion with higher crit damage than the others to make sure that he's getting the debuff, you know?
Akamori is looking to take your main damage dealer out of the picture with this attack. If you get hit with this, you can, and absolutely should, cleanse Enfeeble ASAP. Bringing support champions who can cleanse debuffs is essential to vanquishing this ghostly warlord. Once he's placed in spread Enfeeble debuffs, Akamori can maximize the effectiveness of his first skill, Spectral Lunge. First, he attacks one random champion. Once he hits that first champion, Akamori will then attack anyone else under an Enfeeble debuff and fill his own turn meter by 20% for each enemy hit. If your whole team is under Enfeeble,
That's on the
Akamori is
A1,
getting
so he's gonna be
100%
annoying.
turn meter back when he hits you with this skill. So, keeping those Enfeeble debuffs off your team is super important. Fewer champions get hit, and Akamori gets less turn meter. Win-win. Finally, we have Wraith Javelin. Akamori attacks a single champion and makes full use of his Shade counter. He'll ignore the following protective buffs based on the number of Shade counter stacks. 10 stacks will get him Ignore block damage. 20 will nullify Unkillable. 30 will make ally protection useless. And 40 or more stacks will let Akamori ignore your champion's shield buffs. Remember how Akamori's Shade counter also...
So yeah, unkillable block damage is off the menu. It's not gonna work. Not in this way how the counters work on him. And shield is at 40, so I feel like Shield, Brogni, Mitrala are gonna be the MVPs in here, the top 2 champions for this dungeon, especially Brogni, because his shield cannot be removed. And you've seen the boss actually removes buffs. Then Brogni cleanses the debuffs, so that's gonna be helpful to have multiple cleansers in here. I feel like a Tuhanarak will be pretty solid in here too, mainly because she brings so many good debuffs, and from what I've seen so far, the boss doesn't cleanses his own debuffs, which is going to be extremely important, and of course,
lets him ignore 100% of defense and boosts his crit rate and crit damage massively when up over 40 stacks. Combine it with this skill, and you're looking at one of the most powerful attacks ever. You do not want to come up against this attack with a 40+ Shade counter. So, you're staring down the mighty Phantom Shogun. How do you even begin to fight him? Well, there's a couple tips to make your life a bit easier. Tip numero uno, bring awakened champions. The higher their awakening level,
Seriously?
the better, as they'll be more effective at keeping Akamori's Shade counter in check. Keep the Shade counter low, and you'll keep your survivability high. Tip number 2, bring a cleanser. As you can see, leaving Enfeeble on your team is a bad idea. Cleansing Enfeeble may increase the Shade counter by 2 stacks, but it's better than Akamori gaining 8 stacks when you're landing nothing but weak hits on him. Tip the 3rd, bring plenty of support. Akamori hits hard, so you'll want buffs and debuffs that are going to blunt his attacks and strengthen your defenses. Decreased critical rate is going to be a great friend here, not just in terms of limiting damage, but also limiting Akamori from gaining Shade counter stacks with critical hits.
Yeah, I thought that decreased crit rate would be very powerful.
Do not rely on powerful passive skills. Akamori can block passive skills almost indefinitely thanks to his Forest of Spears skill. Fast teams might counter this, but it's better to not rely on champions with powerful passives in the first place. And finally, consider equipping your champions with Affinity Breaker artifacts. You're likely going to be landing weak hits thanks to Enfeeble, but having Affinity Breaker gives you a decent chance of changing them into critical hits instead.
Yeah, this is actually a good idea, yeah. Now the Affinity Breaker got a bit of a buff, and seems like, by the looks of it, it will fit even better in the game now. So that's great news. I barely have a set that I just used recently.
That's it. We hope you guys are as excited as we are to face off against Akamori, the Phantom Shogun. That's all we've got for this update preview. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
So, pretty interesting, man. It's gonna be a very hardcore boss. I think it might be the hardest boss in the entire game. Definitely by the looks of it. What I haven't really managed to kind of like see was what sort of stats we can get on our banners, for example. They kind of like kept it on the low. I kept on paying attention whenever they're clicking in between them, but all of them, they either had HP or resistance. So it's pretty hard for me to kind of like say what exactly was happening in there. When we are talking about the dungeon, what I kind of like wanted to see was the affinity. And I think I can see that somewhere here. Let's see.
And win it
when
via
he is going
battle.
On it. Can we see the stages, the affinities? I know I've seen it somewhere. There we go. So, seems like stage 20 is the highest by the looks of it. Maybe. I haven't seen him going lower. And, yeah. Force affinity. That's not good for Brogni. So I don't know. Hopefully they're gonna be 25 stages, and Force is not the last stage, because Brogdon is gonna be pretty weak to it, unfortunately. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, guys. That was all for this video. Pretty crazy boss coming. I do think it's gonna come next week, just because they rushed this video out. Let me know your thoughts. Much love, and I'll catch you all soon in the next one. Peace.